everyone. So about a week ago I had my workshop all about fat and cholesterol, and there are a few people that couldn't make it, so I decided to do a video series on fat and cholesterol for everybody who couldn't make it. But then also I was thinking it's really valuable information, and so I wanted to make it really accessible to everybody. There's been a lot of controversy about fat recently, and this is because for about the last 50 or 60 years, we have been going off of some poorly conducted research from the 1950s that stated that saturated fat and cholesterol led to heart disease. And we are kind of waking up to the fact that this is incorrect, and we have plenty of research to support the opposite. So this all started back in the 1900s when scientists were looking at cadavers. They were cutting them open and finding that inside of the blood vessels there were blockages, or at least there was this substance that was inside of the blood vessels. So they hypothesized that it was fat and cholesterol. They then did research on animals. They looked at rabbits and they gave them a high cholesterol diet. And the rabbits didn't do very well on this diet, which kind of further proved their hypothesis that eating a diet high in cholesterol causes issues with within your blood vessels. However, they failed to realize that rabbits are herbivores, and so they don't naturally consume animal cholesterol in the first place, so they are unable to deal with it the same way that humans are. Then there was this researcher in the 1950s. His name is Selkies, and you may have heard of him before. He's kind of blamed for us having all of this misinformation. Around the 1950s, he wanted to find out the cause of the rise in heart attacks. However, cigarette smoking is likely a huge contributor to the rise in heart attacks in the 1950s, but he hypothesized that it was fat in the diet that was leading to heart disease and heart attacks. So he started to do some research. He really cherry-picked his participants, in order to support his own hypothesis. And he neglected things like cigarette smoking, physical activity, the amount of refined carbs and sugar you're eating, as well as stress. So those are huge contributing factors that he just totally neglected to control for in his research. He presented this at the World Health Organization in 1955, and also the American Heart Association really picked up on his research at the same time. With all of this media attention on Selkies' research, this really put the message out there and grabbed everybody's attention and made them think that it was saturated fat and cholesterol from one's diet that causes heart disease. This also translated to everybody going towards a low-fat diet, and also towards fats like trans fats and vegetable and refined seed oils, which have now been shown to be a big contributor to heart disease. And there was actually other research going on at the same time that showed that populations that have a diet that's high in fat, they weren't showing the same increase in heart disease. However, this research was just overlooked, even though it was there the whole time for us. So not only did we have the media on board for this, we also had Health Canada as well as other public policies built around this misinformation. And unfortunately, the Canada's Food Guide that was released this year still states that we should limit our saturated fat, which I strongly disagree with because I don't think that the research shows it. This all started in 1982 when Health Canada put out their Canada's Food Guide, and they suggested limiting your saturated fat, salt, sugar, and alcohol. And I think people really took the limiting your fat and salt to heart, but we don't really see the same thing going on with sugar and alcohol over the last 50 years. Recently, people have been focusing more and more on sugar and maybe more on alcohol as well, but I just found it interesting that as far back as 1982, Health Canada has been telling us to limit our sugar. However, what we did was we made everything low fat and increased the sugar in many products, and this correlates to a rise in heart disease and type 2 diabetes and obesity. So making all of these products low fat and really focusing on reducing our fat actually made us lean more towards refined carbohydrates and sugar, and this causes a lot of inflammation in the body, which tends to be the driving force of chronic diseases. And in 2007, they recommended replacing your saturated fat with unsaturated fat. Dietary guidelines and public policy are often informed by observational studies, and observational studies have a lot of issues with them. So we have animal studies, which I discussed a bit earlier. We also have observational studies. These are done typically with a large population of people, which is a good thing because these types of studies are cheap. You rely on surveys and questionnaires put out to a large group of people. What we have is an issue with people remembering what they ate. It's hard to rely on people to accurately write down exactly what they're eating every day. They may under or overestimate their portion sizes, the amount of calories they had. They may just accidentally forget to include something that was unhealthy. Maybe they're more inclined to remember the foods that were healthy. There's also an issue with data manipulation, and the results can't be replicated with human intervention studies. There may also be conflicts of interest, such as financial or non-financial, and there's a misguided focus on quantity and not quality. So you can have a diet that is high in fat, but all of the fats are healthy, and then you can have a diet that's high in fat that's all fast food, all processed foods, refined seed oils, and trans fats. Now both of these diets are high in fat, but as you can see, they're both vastly different. So these types of studies aren't the best to rely on when we're informing the public. What is better is to look at double-blind, placebo-controlled human intervention studies. These are studies that have two or more groups of people, one being a control group and one being a group that is having a diet intervention. So they are given exactly the same food, their meals are really regulated, and then their blood lipid markers are measured, as well as a bunch of other things. So this is a lot more accurate when you are actually making an intervention in one's diet and seeing what happens. What's also important is the duration of the study and the amount of participants you had. And then also, can we replicate this across different countries? Can we replicate this in Japan, where the diet is much different? So you can blame fat confusion on our media hysteria, or the misrepresentation of some research that was done in the 1950s. But we now have research that shows that saturated fat and dietary cholesterol don't contribute to heart disease like other chronic diseases the way that we thought it did.